Now, I know that there have been numerous lawsuits and things like that associated with circuses and zoos.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel about both of those establishments.
Well, I love the Cirque du Soleil. They don't use wild animals in it, and I think that it's deplorable to use elephants in the circus. You know, they're trucked around to 100 or 150 cities a year. They're on chains 22 hours a day. They're trained through coercive training techniques to do silly, unnatural behaviors. And I think we can entertain ourselves and be stimulated without resorting to having elephants in a little three-ring circus. So I think that as kind of the march of humanity and the improvement of our treatment of animals over time, that will be gone at some point. Zoos, I really lump into two categories. There are the accredited zoos, ones that have more professional animal care operations and that have bigger levels of support to allow them to do the things that are necessary to at least maintain a minimum quality of life, versus what we call the roadside zoos or menageries. There are about 200 accredited zoos, but there are at least 2,000 of these roadside menageries. These are fly-by-night operations that too intensively confine the animals, don't provide enrichment or stimulation, don't typically provide proper veterinary care, procure the animals from disreputable sources or sell them off to canned hunts or to private owners who keep the animals as pets. I mean, the whole thing is simply not an acceptable way to manage or deal with these wild animals. So we're really focused on ending the use of elephants in the circus and ending these roadside zoos. And we want to work with the accredited zoos to drive messaging, because hundreds of millions of people visit these zoos, like the Bronx Zoo or the National Zoo here in Washington, to have them educate people about protecting wildlife, not buying parts of animals for the legal or illegal wildlife trade, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, to encourage people not to get wild animals as pets because it never turns out well for those animals, and to generally instill an ethic of appreciation for animals, and that means animal welfare and conservation. So that's the way we think about it.
So if you're going to go to a zoo, pick a national zoo, a major zoo. They have the people that are treating the animals humanely.
Yes, and you know, I always encourage people to, you know, if you have polar bears in Houston, you know, at a zoo, that's not really a great thing. I mean, polar bears aren't meant to be in a very warm weather climate like that. There are certain animals that are simply not appropriate for certain latitudes. And I think that it's a continuous process of our working with the accredited zoo community to refine best practices, not to get animals from the wrong places. I was very encouraged by this documentary called Blackfish about the orcas and the kind of the systemic problems that exist with the marine amusement park caring for the largest predators in the world, these killer whales or these orcas. So I think that was tremendously enlightening, and certain animals like orcas should simply not be in captivity unless they're rescues, where they have no option of getting back into the wild in an appropriate sort of way, and this becomes the least bad of the options for the animals.
Well, speaking of movies too, I want to add to that list because HBO did a wonderful movie called An Apology to Elephants. So
Yes.
if you're concerned about the elephants in zoos and their welfare overall, I had to walk away. It's a little bit hard to watch, but I think what you're saying about elephants specifically.
Yeah. Intelligent, long-lived animals. You know, there's just a documentary called Parrot Confidential about people wanting parrots and what happens with these parrots. They live 80 or 90 years. Yeah, it's very difficult to care for them properly in that setting. And, you know, the average parrot has 7 owners because people get frustrated with them. They're too loud for them. Their needs are too great. These are flock animals who often live alone. So if you have a rescue parrot, that's one thing. If you're buying a parrot from a pet store, you're contributing to a much larger problem.
Yeah, I have to join in this conversation because, you know, I have 2 of them. And I'm telling you, it is a 100% 24/7, every minute of every day. My baby bird wants to be loved and cuddled.
Yeah.
And he is so wonderful. He gets in the bed with us and he, you know, cuddles and they're wonderfully loving, sentient creatures, and to leave them, it just breaks my heart to know that they're just left in cages and just to sit their lives. It is the most cruel thing that any pet owner can do. And I just don't think they say, oh, I want an animal that talks. And they have no idea that unless you can contribute 100% of your time to this animal, please don't buy parrots. Please.
Well, I went to a sanctuary in Central Virginia. I wrote about this in my book, The Bond, that I saw this guy, Matt Smith, who has a parrot sanctuary. He's devoting his life to care for these animals. He's 31 at the time when I visited. I said, Matt, most of these birds are going to outlive you. Mm-hmm. He's going to spend the next 50 years caring for these animals, and they're still going to outlive him. So if someone even has an animal for 5 years, they're thrusting that responsibility on the rest of society for another 80 years. Yeah. Is that fair?
No, of course not.
I mean, it's not fair. I mean, why should we, the rest of society and the animal welfare community specifically, have to pick up the pieces because of someone's silly decision or ill-considered decision? So a lot of people don't follow through on their commitment to animals, horses, parrots, lots of other animals. And we encourage people to think on the front end about what sort of investment you're able to make. You know, time with the animal, money, lifespan, all these things are critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, that comes to my next question, which is about tethering. Because nothing breaks my heart more than when I see a dog just chained up in the backyard of somebody's house. They don't give it any love, any attention. They'll throw the food and walk away. Why do people have dogs if they're going to do that? And what can we do? I know that you've recently changed the law to extend the length of the chain. It used to be only 3 feet was required.
Well, we're doing a lot of things. I mean, in certain states, we're trying to ban tethering, or to say that you can only tether your animal for a short period of time. You can't do it for 24 hours. And we're trying to educate people. And there are a lot of grassroots groups that are literally knocking on doors and saying, listen, we see your dog is chained. We'd love to build you a fence, get him off the chain, and better for your dog. It looks better. And that's a big growing movement because so many of us feel this pity. And I must confess to you, even though we were animal lovers, growing up, my family in Connecticut, we chained our dog Brandy out in the back because we were just stupid.
Right.
You know, we weren't even thinking of it, and other people were doing it, so we did it. And I look back and think, you know, where was my head? What were we doing?
I feel the same way.
And it's like we weren't malicious. We weren't trying to cause harm to the animal, but things that we do as individuals can cause this sort of problem for animals, which is why we need all of our groups, why we need your show to spread the word about these issues, because a lot of good people will act on these values and these ideas if they're aware, and a lot of people simply aren't aware.
Yeah. Now, okay, this might sound silly to you, but I have a dream, because every day I watch the news in the morning, and when it gets cold, I'm listening to the newscaster or the weather reporter saying, you know, it's down in the 30s, it's really cold. And I want to leap in there and go, tell everybody to bring their dogs inside. It's too cold outside. Yeah. How do I get this done? Mm-hmm. How do I make this happen on a national level where every weather person will be required, if it's too hot or too cold, to report that? Like you said, it makes people aware, because otherwise maybe they don't know. Yeah.
Not sure if we could require it, but what we do is we go to conventions at HSUS. We go to conventions of weather personnel at the stations. Okay. And we educate them and talk to them and remind them, and we're seeing an incredible growth in the talking about this issue. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, after Hurricane Katrina, with this response where we saw so many people stay behind in the hurricane because they wouldn't leave their animal, there's much more consciousness about the power of the human-animal bond. And I think a lot of people recognize that weather and animals, you know, we need to really think about them and not forget them when there's a hurricane, when there's a cold weather front. You know, dogs in hot cars. I mean, a lot of weather forecasters tell people, you know, we're going to have a 100-degree day. That car gets heated up to 140 degrees before you even know it, and that animal will be dead in a matter of minutes. So we're seeing laws change on that. I mean, it's a crime in some states to leave an animal in a car like that.
I think I want to go to one of these conventions.
Yeah, you should. Yes, you're an evangelical on this, which is great.
Yeah, no, I just feel good, you know, sitting outside in the cold.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Wayne Pacelle. It's my honor to interview you, really. And
Thank you.
really, I've read your book, and it is absolutely incredible. It is a must read for anyone who cares about animals at all. And I have to say, it's so well written. I had to take out my dictionary a couple of times, though, because
Sorry about that. Yes.
No, I was challenging. I
Oh,
loved it.
Yeah.
But you talk about so many of these issues that we've briefly discussed here
Yeah.
from such a logical standpoint and from such an empathetic standpoint. And I think there's so much in there to be gained. So
You know, I don't think that our ideas are radical. I don't think they're far out. I think these are mainstream ideas. I mean, who's for cruelty? No one should be. So I think we've got a logical case to make, and I'm really grateful to you for helping
Thank
make
you.
it to
That
your
means a lot
viewers.
to me.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.